Hi, team. Welcome to 10 Talks. Today's conversation is all about concussions. And I know that we have heard a lot of information about it, and it's so different when it's actually us. And Mark and I are here to really set you up as a parent or as an athlete or as an executive or just a person who's a champion in your life to really recognize what is a concussion, what happens when I have one, how do I get myself set up to get the right help to really heal and be able to be back in life the way I want to. So, Mark, such a gift to have you on our team. Thank you for being on this journey and really sharing the gift of what's going on in our brains.
Well, good morning, and good to see you again. Concussions are one of my favorite topics because I used to do a little bit of research on it back in the day when I was in New York. Um, they're ubiquitous. It happens entirely too often, especially in youth sports, and so we'll talk about today kind of what they are and what to look for. So what is a concussion? Uh, the best way to put it is it you can think of it as a traumatic brain injury, like a mild traumatic brain injury. That used to be actually interchangeable with that term. Times have changed a little bit as we kind of understand, but think of it as a head injury. Okay, either a direct blow to the head or an indirect blow to the body that causes your head to jostle. So the word concussion comes from a Latin term that it's failing me right now, but it actually means to rattle or shake. So that's where the word actually comes from. The reason that this is important is that a concussion is actually a rotational injury. So it's not that you get hit in the head and get hit, go boom. It's that your brain is actually a free floating organism. It's part of your body, but it's inside your skull, and so which is bony. And so when you get hit, whether it's your head itself or your body, if your head moves, your brain actually shifts and bashes up against the inside of your skull. And that can lead to a variety of things. It can lead to neuronal shearing. It can lead to decreased cerebral blood flow, a hypermetabolic state where actually you're using more glucose as a result of this injury, and it causes brain fog, and among other things. And the interesting thing about a concussion is that you only have to have one symptom of a concussion to be diagnosed with it. And that can be from having a headache, as mild as a headache, all the way to loss of consciousness. A very, very important thing to discuss is that you don't have to lose consciousness or black out to have a concussion. So you can actually be alert, maybe not alert, but you don't have to be actually like out cold to have a concussion. So it's any alteration of consciousness, it results in a concussion if it's from a head injury. So that being said, what do we do? How do we know if someone's had it? So got to keep your eyes peeled. The best thing you can do is to actually, as either a parent, a coach, a ref, is to take the CDC's, the Center for Disease Control, has a little unit that you can take online called Heads Up. Okay. It's a fabulous educational program that it's almost really required by a lot of youth sports organizations for folks to take, but it actually helps you learn the signs and symptoms of concussion, which are, headache and wooziness and all that other stuff. On the field, as far as on-field recognition, there are a couple of forms that can be used. And so there's the Sports Concussion Assessment Tool 5, or the SCAT-5, which is used when you actually have a medical professional at the ready. If you don't have a medical professional at the field, which is okay, you can't expect that to happen all the time, you would use the CRT, or the Concussion Recognition Tool. They're related, but literally the difference is that you either have a medical professional there or not. The idea behind it is that there's an on-field, like, sideline assessment component, and you're trying to rule out badness. Does this person need to go to the emergency room right now? Do they have loss of consciousness, or is there an actual traumatic open head wound? Or if you see any of that stuff, you send them. They go to the ER. After you've gone through the on-field assessment, which it'll walk you through it. It's kind of like having an AED, or the device available at school if someone has a cardiac event. It'll actually tell you what to do. This you just read. All right, next, this step one, this is step two. Depending on where you are on that, then you can go through the workflow. Once you determine that the patient or young athlete doesn't need to go to the ER and they could actually, like, you can take them aside, you would take them to a quiet area and complete the rest of the form. So that's the off-field assessment that could have a medical professional or not there. Either way, you're going to want to see the doctor within 24 hours. So think about the brain as a computer. So when if you've had a concussion, a computer needs to reboot very slowly, like one program at a time. It's the same idea with either returning to play or returning to academics. So for young people who are actually still in school, returning to school or returning to academics has to occur before you ever talk about sport. So the returning to academic protocol, which occurs on a 5 or 6 step basis, or really I think it's 4 for that, and then 6 for sport, you would reload one program at a time. So the first 24-hour period, you basically have them calm, quiet. Back in the day, it was almost like a cocoon approach. Right. You don't do that anymore. In fact, that's bad. You want the computer to turn back on. Yeah. So you start to then gradually challenge them with a little bit more academic activity at a time until finally they're able to tolerate a full school day. If you can't tolerate one of the steps, you go back to the other until you can. Most people, when they've had a concussion, it's gone in somewhere between 7 to 14 days. That's for an adult. For kids, it's usually gone within 4 weeks. So it self-resolves. Like, this should spontaneously resolve. But if you've already had one, it can be these mild little cluster of events. It can be harder to recover. So if you've had a concussion, you pull them off the field. They sit out, because if you end up sending them back in and they get another concussion within the window of having been concussed, there's something called second impact syndrome, or SIS. That's really dangerous. That can lead to cerebral edema and a medical emergency and maybe even death. So, like, don't do it. That's where we're thinking, like, okay, back in the day, if you like, how many fingers am I holding up? If you guessed right, you get to play again. That was a terrible idea. I myself, I remember getting hit as a quarterback in a middle school game and flipped. And I woke up on my back, and my coach and my teammates were around me, and half of them were making fun of me. My coach was freaked out, and I just remember someone literally put fingers in front of my face, and I purposely guessed wrong, thinking it was funny. Then I realized my coach actually wanted me to say the right thing. So that's a segue into, a lot of folks won't tell you if they have a concussion because they don't want to come out. You have to be honest about it. So you need to know why it's actually dangerous, which is it's a brain injury. Okay. So like 50% of the time people underreport. So when I tell you the stat that there are 3.8 million sports related concussions a year, you might be like, well, that's a lot. Well, that's the number that are reported. Right. So there are a lot more than that. In the youth environment, about half of that can be in under 18s. So, I mean, we're talking like nearly 2 million concussions that may or may not actually be that low of a number. One of the things that, at least at schools and a lot of youth sports organizations and at higher levels, will require preseason impact testing or neuropsychological testing to determine the, quote, baseline of cognitive functioning. I have such a love-hate relationship with that concept, because it's the best we got, so that you kind of have to use it. But it's so commonly tanked on purpose by athletes, so that when they do get a concussion, they can still beat their previous score to be allowed to go back in. That it bothers me. But we don't have anything better. So I don't want to say poor things about it, because we really don't have an alternative. One of the things that, again, it's a bit of an issue, is that if, say, you have an athlete, okay, who is not concussed, but is depressed, so has a mood disorder or depressive symptoms, and you give them the impact test, they can appear concussed. Wow. So again, you have to think about how valuable it is, but at the same time note that it's as good as we got to be able to see before and after. Assuming that someone's authentically using it, it can be a good tool. After the person has been seen on the field, pulled off the field for that off-field assessment, then they're taken to the doctor. Typically, they're seen by a neurologist who can kind of weigh in and provide very good guidance about what to do. The danger about having successive concussions and why that ends a lot of careers is that it can end up leading to something much bigger, which there is a correlation, but it's not necessarily causative for something called chronic traumatic encephalopathy, or CTE, which is that big term in the news that's been around for like 10 plus, well, really since Dr. Amalu in 2005 found on former NFL players who had had a lot of head injuries that they had these tauopathies, like these tau proteins in their brain. So it was actually caused brain changes. You don't know if someone has CTE at the time. It's the only way you can diagnose it is actually after they've died.
Yeah, the autopsy.
But they look like they have either Parkinson's or Alzheimer's, but based on the dementing qualities to the illness. So we know that head injuries are bad. Lots of head injuries, successive ones are bad. They think of a concussion as a sunburn. Okay, so one, not going to kill you. A lot of sunburns, bad, right? So it can cause skin cancer. So same idea. So what do we do? How do we change all of this? So first is education. We talked about heads up. And two, note as a coach, you are the person who's absolutely in control of practices and how they are. So concussions in games, probably inevitable, especially in contact sports. In practice, though, you don't have to have athletes having head-to-head contact or using some methods of contact. So you can actually modify practice to limit head injury. There was a big school, a D1 program, Dartmouth. Okay, I know it's not like big Power 5 style football team, but they banned like any sort of like physical contact or with your head since 2010 in practice. It didn't affect the team at all. In fact, they played really well after that because they worked on form of tackling, and they had a much lesser risk of developing head injury as a result. So it's been done before.
Yeah.
And more programs are actually going towards that.
Well, Mark, that was fabulous. And what I really want to do is empower the person to really take agency of their own health and really own that this is my brain and I'm going to protect it and I'm going to take really good care of myself, because even the people that want to support you, we don't know exactly what's happening. Yes, we can do the test. And like you said, some people are not honest on the test. So how can we really inspire, educate, and encourage a person to recognize, I got to take great care of myself and I've got to own when there's a concussion, and rather than wanting to get myself back in the game?
I think it's really a cultural shift, and it starts at the top, especially with organizations and youth sports organizations, or really in the NCAA. Research is also improving. So as we have more of an evidence base about what a concussion really is and what those changes are in the brain, we're going to then be able to give better advice to the people who actually are making the decisions about on-field play and that in practices. The problem about concussions, you can't see it. If someone has a brain bleed, okay, has gone through an awful accident or whatever, and goes in and gets a CT scan, you can see it. If you give someone a CT scan or an MRI, functional MRI, you're not going to see a concussion. It won't look different. But if you have these metabolic changes, you might start to see maybe some blood level changes, but in the moment, it's not helpful. And clinically, it's not going to change anything. So we already have this protocol that you're already going to do. So why go through the time and trouble and spend money when you actually already know what you need to do to get them better? It's just, it's frustrating that we don't actually know everything that's occurring quite yet.
So if I'm an athlete or a person that actually has my head gets jostled in terms of just the term of it, and I think, oh, I don't know, like, I don't know, my head kind of hurts, I'm a little dizzy from it, but I don't know if it's a concussion. What do I do?
Well, the phrase that Heads Up uses, that training with the CDC is, when in doubt, sit them out.
Love it.
If I mean, there's no question. If you think you might have a concussion because you're not feeling great, you're pretty proud of you. Whether it's whatever graded level. So there's actually there's actually 25 different ways to determine symptom severity in concussion. And there's like 3 that are actually used. But if you yourself recognize you're not feeling the same, take a break. Go actually make an appointment to see your coach and the team physician to actually get it addressed and checked out.
So Mark, if I'm in the game and I get hit,
Yeah.
and I'm okay. I get the hit, but I just keep going. And then as the game plays, I start to feel different.
Mhm.
Is that the way the concussion works, or can I really play through and not, from an adrenaline perspective, maybe not feel it and then get home and have a really bad headache? Like, I'm just wanting to really put these scenarios in all of our heads so that as we're living life and doing this, we're like, I can recognize this now.
So, unfortunately, concussion symptoms can develop at any time. Like, there could be slow progress as far as them actually happening. So it could be hours after the game, if after you've for new symptoms to arise, which is why that 24-hour window of time after potential observed head injury, you need to have someone with you, or to at least check in. So if it happened, I mean, you could power through. Lots of people do. That's not a good idea. You could then get hit again and things are bad. I would check in with your trainer on the sideline, and then that can alert them to, I mean, they also might pull you, might physically grab your pads and be like, hey, no, we're going to go to the tent and get it checked out.
So let's say that I've got a concussion and I'm following protocol, but I'm really struggling just from the fact that physiologically I'm not exercising as much anymore. I'm isolated from my team because the lights hurt. I mean, there's just a lot that happens, and I want to really be real about how hard this is on our hearts and just being taken out of what we belong to.
It's part of why the old mindset of the cocoon treatment's a bad idea. So because it is socially isolating, so you would still want to stay connected with friends and teammates and whatnot. And so if you're able to at least attend practice, whether or not you're actually doing anything, it's still good for you to be there and to hear the plays or whatever. Because it can happen to anybody, and it's really unfortunate when it does happen, because it's avoidable in practice, maybe not in the game, as I've said. And one thing we didn't talk about is the different sports it can occur in. It's not necessarily just the big ones you might think, like football or American football for male athletes, or hockey, but women's soccer has the highest prevalence rate, at least for women's sports. And it's not necessarily from the ball hitting the head, but also maybe from taking an elbow, from going up for a header or whatever, or from hitting the ground. Remember, it's a rotational injury, so it's how your head moves as a result of all that. So women's sports, actually women are more prone to developing concussions than men are. It might be something to do with their physiology. Again, not entirely proven.
And so if I want to go to practice, but yet it gives me a headache in terms of the noise, the light, how do I manage really that desire to show up at practice? Because if a doctor has told my coach that I've got a concussion, but I can still come to practice, and I go, but I'm struggling, my coach can see that as I'm not as engaged, or there's just a lot that happens here.
Yeah, I mean, that could happen. If you're having active symptoms, we got to go back one step on the return to play protocol, which probably doesn't involve being there in person. So you have to just, we talked all about adhering to different steps, and so there literally are 6 steps to follow, and each one should take roughly 24 hours to complete. And if you can't, then you go back.
I love that. So very measurable, and it does put me in control. I do have the test. I do know, okay, I did 3 of them and I tried the 4th and it started hurting. So, okay, so we've got the actual management of getting a concussion. I'm back playing and I've somewhat healed from that concussion, and I'm nervous. I'm trying to protect it. Like, I'm playing a little bit injured now because I don't want that to happen again.
So there you go. That was what I was expecting to hear. Once you've had a concussion, you've somehow the spontaneously resolved and you're actually ready to go back, what do you do with that anxiety about anticipating maybe getting another concussion? That is something that you probably have to work on with your coach, or well, coach of the team, or life coach that you've been working with, or whomever, because you got to gain that confidence back. Because if you, as we've known,
Yeah.
when you're in the game, if you're not playing confident, you're more prone to injury. So you're actually more prone to getting hurt again if you don't go full speed or whatever, if you're playing tentatively, especially in football. And I can be a testament to that. Definitely has happened to me. So
I think
yeah.
all of us, the minute that we're playing tentative, or even in life, if we're worried about the injury, that's actually what shows up. So really recognizing our mind is a very powerful component of this.
Mhm. It's the same thing with recovering from a knee injury. It's just the head injury is a little bit more serious than an ankle injury. You have to take it seriously, and the recovery process requires the same sort of PT. It's
Yeah.
just different.
Yeah. So, okay, I'm going to work through the anxiety of reentry and gain my confidence, which just takes practice. Again, we know the winning strategy for confidence is doing the work so that you get the reps in, and your brain, your body, everything kind of agrees, okay, I can do this. So you can't really fake it till you make it. You got to get out there and do the work on it. And I get another concussion. What happens?
Well, if you get another concussion, it depends on the time frame on how close together they were. But if you that's two. So then you have to really be, and you still have to go through the protocol of
Right.
return to academics and play. But you start to have to weigh the benefit of ongoing participation in the sport versus the potential risk for further action, because you're now more prone to getting another concussion. This is how actually a lot of careers end. There's no set number
Yeah.
that says that once you've had X number of concussions, you're done.
Yeah.
It used to be that it was 3. That was a common number that was thrown out there, and of course, that's the number that were observed, or that you could know. You might have had a lot more than that.
Yeah.
It's going to take a long, hard conversation between you and your coach about what maybe you take this rest of the season off and you rest and recover. I've seen folks decide, well, there's only 2 weeks left in the season, even though I had and I got better. Maybe it's not worth really competing this specific season, and take it off and try again. But that's why also we talked a lot about making sure that your identity out of sport is still strong, and that you still have other things that you can do to enjoy and participate in.
Yeah, we need that whole person development. I mean, as great as our careers are in sport, we need that healthy life away from sport to really be able to manage the ups and downs and all the changes. So, Mark, great information on concussions. Any additional winning strategies or words of wisdom?
No, just big thing. Concussions or sunburns. When in doubt, sit them out. And there's no like medication or fix for them. It really just takes time, and that really sticking to that graded return to play protocol, and education for coaches and parents and the athletes themselves to know about the risks of them and what to do when they actually occur. So doing that training that I described, the heads up training, is really important, but also having those tools available to the team on the sideline with physical trainers. And for folks that are in like rural areas, it would be a great idea to leverage something like telehealth to have maybe an on-call physician for the league, if something bad were to happen on the field, just to provide some guidance. There's a lot of things that you can do from a higher up level to really work on concussion management and prevention.
And what about screen time? Because if I'm going to be out, that's kind of my go-to to stay connected. What's that doing to the brain?
It depends on, so a lot of theories behind it. It depends on what stage you are in recovery.
Okay.
So even that, like not level 0, where you're having 24 hours of just complete and other, silence, rest. But step 1, you still do like 15 minutes of screen time just to maintain that social connection. I don't think it's the greatest use of your time. I'd prefer to have genuine interaction, being in the same room if you're able to tolerate it. But if you're actively having a headache and you need to lie down, then like do that. But yeah, I mean, small doses.
Okay, team, we hope that we have set you up to really be educated, understand, most importantly, take care of your brain. It's really important. And I really respect that the term just jostle, your brain just getting jostled. It's not necessarily that you're knocked out. It's not that you have a hit to your head. There's so many ways that our brain can be affected. And Mark, thank you so much for the gift of education. And team, it's up to you. We are on your support team. Take care of you and go out and win life. Thank you,
Thanks,
Mark.
y'all.